The knock came just as the kettle started to whistle. Not a casual rap, not even an urgent bang. This was deliberate, measured, aggressive. Whoever it was wanted to be heard, and they wanted me annoyed. I stepped onto the front porch of my lake cabin, coffee mug in hand, squinting against the morning sun. The woman standing there looked like she'd been waiting for hours. Pressed blouse, polished loafers, clipboard clenched like a weapon. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun so severe it looked like it hurt. "You're the one who threw the party last night?" she asked without preamble. I sipped my coffee. "Morning to you, too." Her eyes narrowed. "I'm Karen Whitmore, president of the Lakeshore Ridge HOA. I'm here because your party was in direct violation of our community noise regulations." I leaned against the porch post and let out a short laugh. "You're serious?" "Deadly," she said. "Per Section 8.2b of the Lakeshore Ridge Covenant, noise exceeding 70 decibels past 9 p.m. is subject to a fine $250 payable to the HOA Treasury." "You're on the wrong porch," I said, gesturing to the dense tree line behind her. "That ridge up there, that's your domain. This cabin, it sits on land outside your HOA boundaries, always has." She tapped the clipboard. "Sound carries, Mr. Gabe Rayner." "Mr. Rayner, just because you don't pay dues doesn't mean you're exempt from responsibility. Your party kept Lakeshore Ridge residents awake until after midnight. The HOA demands accountability. You demand money. Big difference," I said. "But here's the thing, I'm not paying a fine to an organization I don't belong to. You're disturbing the peace. You're disturbing my morning." Karen's lips pinched together like she was trying to swallow her frustration. "If you refuse to comply, I'll have no choice but to escalate this." "Escalate away," I said, raising my mug in mock salute. "Just make sure you bring coffee next time." She turned sharply and stormed back up the gravel path, heels clicking like gunshots against the stones. I watched her vanish behind the trees, shaking my head. I'd heard stories about HOA drama, but I'd always figured those were for people boxed into manicured cul-de-sacs, not lone cabins nestled beside quiet lakes. Apparently, Karen hadn't gotten the memo. I walked back inside, letting the screen door hiss closed behind me. The lake glistened through the cabin's wide front windows, serene and silent. The place had been in my family for 3 generations, built by my grandfather, maintained by my father, and now mean a peaceful retreat, untouched by suburban squabbles and nosy neighbors. Or so I'd thought. By noon there was an envelope taped to my boathouse door, official HOA stationery. Inside was a printed notice of violation with my name crudely written in Sharpie, along with the words "Second Warning." I hadn't even received the first. Karen wasn't letting this go. That evening, as I grilled steaks on the back deck with my buddy Mark, an off-duty firefighter who dropped by to fish, we heard a buzzing sound above a drone. "Don't tell me that's hers," Mark said, shading his eyes. I watched the little machine hover above my yard, dipping and weaving like a mechanical vulture. "I'm pretty sure it is. Isn't that illegal? On private property without consent?" "Yep." I walked inside, came back out with a broom, and took one good swing. The drone clattered to the ground like a dying insect, skidding across the gravel. "You know she's going to lose it," Mark said with a chuckle. "Good. Let her." The next morning, she brought the sheriff. 2 squad cars rolled up around 9 a.m. Karen trailed behind them, arms folded, eyes gleaming with self-righteous victory. I met the deputies at the bottom of the porch steps, deed in hand, coffee in the other morning offices. "What's this about?" Karen jumped in. "This man destroyed my surveillance equipment. That's criminal mischief." The senior deputy raised a hand. "Ma'am, let's let him speak." I handed over the deed. "This cabin sits outside Lakeshore Ridge boundaries, always has. I've been harassed, filmed without permission, and slapped with bogus fines from a woman who thinks she runs this entire lake." The deputy studied the paperwork, glanced at the drone wreckage, then looked at Karen. "Ma'am, unless you've got a court order or proof he violated county laws, this isn't our jurisdiction." Karen's mouth opened and closed, stunned, silent for the first time. The deputy handed me back the deed. "Sorry to trouble you, Mr. Rayner." "Not a problem, officer," I said, locking eyes with Karen. "Not a problem at all." But deep down, I knew she wasn't done. Not by a long shot, and neither was I. By the time I returned from town the next afternoon, the war had already escalated. Someone, no doubt Karen, had taped another notice to the oak tree at the end of my drive. This one was in bold red letters: "Final warning, pay the fine or face enforcement action." It was almost theatrical. HOA letterhead complete with fake legal jargon, like she was preparing to go full courtroom drama. I yanked the paper down and tossed it into the fire pit, watching it curl and blacken as flames licked it into ash. Karen wasn't just persistent, she was obsessed. 2 days later, the surveillance resumed. A second drone appeared, larger than the last, humming like a lawnmower as it hovered over my property. It circled my boathouse, swooped low over my back deck, and even filmed through my kitchen window. I called the sheriff's office to report unauthorized surveillance. They logged it but made it clear that unless the drone was armed or directly interfering, there wasn't much they could do. "Civil matter," they said. "File a complaint." Karen knew exactly where the line was. and she danced just close enough not to cross it, so I built a countermeasure with some scrap metal, signal dampeners, and a cheap RF jammer from an old hunting kit. I scrambled the drone's frequency. It jerked mid-air, spun once, and spiraled into the lake like a stunned wasp. The splash was glorious. The next morning, I found a laminated photo in my mailbox. Karen, pointing at the empty sky, face twisted in fury. Below it, in black Sharpie, "This isn't over." Apparently she thought this was a game. Or maybe she saw herself as the hero in some bizarre neighborhood crusade. Either way, she was escalating and dragging her whole HOA into it. The following week, things turned sinister. I was cutting wood out back when I heard tires on gravel. I stepped around the shed and saw 3 trucks parked at the edge of my property, 2 black, 1 silver, each with Lakeshore Ridge HOA maintenance magnets slapped on the sides. 5 men in reflective vests unloaded shovels and stakes. "What do you think you're doing?" I called out, lowering the chainsaw. A man with a clipboard, mid-50s, sunburned and smug, pointed toward my property line, surveying for noise barrier installation. "Karen says it's HOA mandated on my land. She says your property was recently annexed into the HOA district." I stepped closer, jaw tight. "There is no annexation. This land isn't part of Lakeshore Ridge. Never has been." The man shrugged. "We're just following orders. You've got 5 minutes to leave, or I call the sheriff, and this time I'll press trespassing charges." They hesitated. One guy looked nervous, but the leader rolled his eyes and signaled for them to pack up. They left in silence, dust rising behind them that night. I made some calls, first to my cousin Collisavelle, litigation attorney, sharp as a scalpel, and twice as ruthless. Then to Earl, the local county recorder who owed me a favor after I had helped his nephew get a job with the fire department. Within 24 hours, I had copies of my land deed, parcel maps, and a historical boundary record that dated back to 1962. The documents made one thing absolutely clear: my property was never included in any HOA jurisdiction. Karen's so-called annexation was nothing but bluster and paper threats. Callie helped me draft a cease and desist letter, formal, legally binding, and sharp enough to cut steel. We delivered it in person. Karen opened her door in a silk robe and sunglasses, surprised to see me standing there with Callie in tow. "You're not welcome here," she hissed. Callie handed over the letter. "You've overstepped your authority. You've committed harassment, trespassing, and unlawful surveillance. Further interference will result in civil litigation." Karen's hands trembled as she took the envelope. "You think you can scare me with paperwork?" Callie didn't flinch. "I don't need to scare you. The court will handle that." Karen slammed the door in our faces, but I could hear her yelling through the glass. Back at my cabin, things finally quieted for a day or two, but I knew Karen. She didn't retreat. She regrouped, and sure enough, on the 3rd morning, a pair of county vehicles rolled up my drive. 2 men stepped out, zoning inspectors. "We received an anonymous complaint," one of them said, "about potential violations on your deck and boathouse. We need to do a full inspection." I nodded slowly. Karen wasn't backing down. She was just changing tactics. The county inspectors were polite, but firm. Clipboard men, buttoned up and uncomfortable, like they didn't enjoy being used as pawns in local vendettas, but weren't paid enough to refuse. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rayner," one said, adjusting his glasses, "but when we receive a formal complaint about code violations, we're obligated to follow through." I nodded and stepped aside. "You'll find everything's in order." They spent 2 hours combing over my deck and boathouse, snapping photos, measuring joist gaps, and muttering to each other. One even climbed onto the roof with a drone to check the satellite dish alignment. "Complaint claimed your deck was expanded without a permit," the taller inspector explained. "Also alleged improper runoff into the lake and non-compliant septic lines." She went for the whole menu. "Huh," I said dryly. He offered a tight smile. "We'll file our report with the county by next week. If everything checks out, you'll be cleared." I watched them drive off, gravel crunching under their tires, and felt the tension settle into my chest like a storm cloud that refused to break. Her in wasn't just annoying anymore, she was dangerous, and she had a strategy now. She wasn't trying to find me anymore. She was trying to bury me in bureaucracy, to make my life so miserable and entangled in red tape that I'd either leave or snap. But what she didn't know was that this land had weathered storms much stronger than her. My grandfather, a World War II vet, built this cabin with his bare hands. My father maintained it through hurricanes, floods, and a recession that nearly took the family business. It wasn't just wood and stone, it was legacy. And legacies aren't surrendered to HOA presidents with too much time and too little authority. I called Callie that night. "We need to go public," I said. She didn't hesitate. "I'll draft the statements. You gather the names." By the end of the week, we had over a dozen lakefront homeowners not part of the HOA who shared eerily similar stories: unauthorized warnings, fake fines, surveillance drones, all orchestrated by Karen. One elderly couple had paid over $1,200 in violation penalties, too intimidated to challenge the paperwork she'd left on their dock. Another man, an artist who lived in a converted fishing cabin, had been told his sculptures, violated community aesthetic guidelines. He didn't even live on the same side of the lake. We collected signed affidavits, dated letters, even some shaky drone footage from one of the harassed homeowners. Then Callie contacted the local news a week later. The story aired: HOA overreach or harassment. Lakeshore Ridge president accused of illegal enforcement. They interviewed me standing on my porch, framed by the lake and tall pines, holding the original property deed. The segment cut between homeowner testimonies, expert legal analysis, and a short but powerful clip of Karen refusing to comment. The community buzzed, social media lit up, and Karen lost control of the narrative for the first time. People weren't intimidated by her titles or clipboards. They saw through the power trip. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Karen didn't attend, but her name was on every tongue still. I knew she wouldn't go quietly. 2 days after the news piece aired, I came home to find my dock slathered in red paint. Across the planks, in angry, dripping letters, "Get out." It didn't scare me. It confirmed what I already knew. She was unraveling. I reported the vandalism, filed a police report. Then, with Callie's help, I filed a civil suit for harassment, trespassing, and damages. And I didn't stop there. Remember Earl, the county recorder who owed me a favor? He dug up something golden. A zoning discrepancy. Karen's own home had an unpermitted addition built 6 years ago. No inspections, no environmental compliance, and it violated her own HOA's guidelines. The cherry on top: her HOA maintenance trucks had been funded through community dues, but they'd been used almost exclusively for personal errands, including grocery runs and moving her son into college. We compiled everything into a neatly labeled folder and sent it to the HOA board, county officials, and local news. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, Karen would be walking into a buzzsaw. I sat on my porch that night, staring at the painted slurs drying on my dock, sipping coffee, as the breeze rolled off the lake. The world was finally seeing her for what she was, and I was just getting started. The HOA clubhouse had never seen a crowd like this. Usually these monthly meetings were dull affairs, half a dozen retirees bickering over mailbox paint colors and fence heights. But this night, nearly 50 residents packed into the cramped community room, buzzing with quiet anticipation. Some were angry, some were curious. A few looked downright nervous. At the center of it all, Karen Whitmore stood behind the podium, dressed in her usual pastel perfection, hair sculpted like a helmet. Her confident smile faltered the moment she saw Callie and me walk in, flanked by 3 homeowners, the county zoning inspector, and 2 plainclothes officers. "Mr. Rayner," she said, forcing a tight smile, "this meeting is for HOA members." Only Callie stepped forward. "We're here under Section 14 of the HOA Charter. When a matter of financial misconduct or unlawful governance arises, the board must open its doors to affected parties and county observers." Karen's eyes darted toward the board 4 members, all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "I wasn't notified of any misconduct," she said flatly. "You were served the paperwork 2 days ago," Callie replied, producing a copy of the receipt. "Certified mail. You signed it." Silence fell over the room. Then I stepped forward, setting a thick folder on the podium. "This is a compiled report of HOA overreach, harassment, surveillance, and financial abuse," I said, letting my voice carry. 21 homeowners, some under your jurisdiction, most not have submitted sworn affidavits outlining coercion and fraud. Karen snorted. "This is a witch hunt." Callie opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. One of Karen's trucks parked at a grocery store, loaded with personal items, HOA logo on the door. "This is one of 4 documented uses of HOA resources for private errands." Another photo: Karen's unpermitted back patio, built in 2018 without any filed plans, in direct violation of your own code. Karen's lips parted, then closed. Her hands gripped the podium. "I acted in the best interest of the community," she said, voice shaking. "Everything I did was for order, for standards." "Did extorting $1,200 from the Rollins couple help maintain standards?" I asked, stepping closer. "They were too scared to speak tonight, but we have the check. And your signature on the citation." Whispers rippled across the room. A board member, Judith Sloan, finally spoke. "Karen, did you really issue fines to non—" Karen didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the crowd, desperation rising in her voice. "You all wanted this. You elected me to protect our values, to enforce rules. I did what no one else had the spine to do. You terrorized people," I said, calm but firm. "You stretched your power beyond your limits and tried to bully anyone who didn't bend." The plainclothes officers exchanged a glance before stepping forward. Karen Whitmore once said, holding out a document, "You are being formally notified of a civil lawsuit filed with the county court. The charges include harassment, misuse of community funds, trespassing, and attempted property fraud." Karen backed away, color draining from her face. You can't do this. I am the H." "No," Judith said quietly, "not anymore." With a shaking hand, she opened a folder and pulled out a typed motion. "As vice president, I move to suspend Karen Whitmore from her duties effective immediately, pending full investigation." A second board member raised his hand. I second. The vote passed unanimous. Karen stood frozen for a long, silent moment. Then she snatched her clipboard, stormed out of the clubhouse, and into the cool night, past rows of silent faces who once feared her. No one followed. No one stopped her. Was alone. Back at my cabin, the lake was calm again, peaceful. The red paint had been scrubbed from the dock. The old wind chimes taken down during the chaos hung again, whispering in the wind. Mark dropped by that evening, cooler in hand. Heard the queen bee finally lost her hive, he said with a grin. She built it out of sand. I said, and the tide came in. We sat by the fire pit, watching the stars ripple on the lake's surface. The cabin, my home, felt untouched again. Like a chapter had closed, but something had changed in me too. Karen had pushed me farther than anyone ever had. And in standing my ground, I'd learned something vital. People like her thrive only when no one stands up to them. But the moment someone does, they fall. Fast and hard. The fire crackled and I raised my glass toward the dark ridge across the water. 2 boundaries, I said. 2 backbone, Mark replied, and we drank to both.